Hello everyone, welcome to today's lecture. As every Sunday, today we are going to have another lecture of this self-knowledge course. Today we are going to talk about the inner chatter and the psychological song. And this topic is very important since we see how difficult it is to silence the mind when we want to start living consciously and when we are trying, for example, to meditate. And we will see that by working on these two aspects, and this will allow us to have control over our mind, to get to silence our mind. And this is something we need too much. And the objective of this lecture will be to know what the inner chatter and the psychological song are, what they are based on, how they are composed, what are their consequences, and how to work them. And also, we are going to learn how to solve resentments. And this topic that we are going to discuss today is very important for us to reflect on it, since these two psychological aspects drained us a lot of energy and keep our consciousness asleep. So actually this topic, well, as every one is of topics that we talk in this course, is very important for us to get to know ourselves. Let's first start talking about the inner chatter and what is and where does it come from. The inner chatter is that constant talk that is in our mind all the time. If we decide to self-observe our mind, we will realize that this mental chatter doesn't stop. In our mind, we are constantly talking about what we do or something we have already done. We talk about other people, or we are complaining about something, or we are thinking about something that someone told us, or something that we want to do. We are sometimes like sports commentators narrating everything that we are doing. Other times we are singing songs in our mind. So we see that our mind never stops. And if we pay attention, we will see that the vice of chatting in the mind is so big that many times conversations without any meaning are being processed in our mind. But if we remember the lecture number 4, where we talk about the 7 energetic centers that we possess internally, we analyze the fact that every day these 7 centers are supplied with energy so that they fulfill their different functions. And we talk there about our intellectual center, where we receive the mental energy, or the amount of mental energy that we need to function during one day. And in that lecture, we talk about that the most important energy that we have is the sexual energy. But what happens? When we just wake up and we start thinking and thinking, we start with that unstoppable train of thoughts, we exhaust the amount of mental energy that we must use for one day. We exhaust it in, 3-4 hours. We already wear out all our mental energy. And what it does, it goes and steals energy from the sexual center to continue functioning. And as we have our sexual energy so we can create ourselves, when we don't learn to stop or to silence our mind, we are going to never be able to start creating ourselves internally. So because we are energetically wearing ourselves out all the time. So we have probably heard that the best way to think is not to think. And this is precisely because long ago we lost control over our mind. It is no longer our consciousness that uses our intellectual capacity when necessary. Nowadays, it is the mind that dominates us, or rather, each one of our psychological defects that have taken over our mind, creating a constant and an unnecessary and insubstantial inner chatter. So, for that reason, this inner chatter has or ended up becoming device of thinking. And we can see that when we want to meditate, achieve inner silence, and when we try to stay for a few moments without thinking at all, we begin to feel anxiety, and we begin to feel an impossibility of keeping our mind still. That is because we already made a vice of thinking. There we can corroborate that this has become something very hard for us, that it has become a vice for us. We can even see how people are walking, for example, on the street and talking to themselves without, without being on the freehand. Even to yourself, it has probably happened that you find yourself talking to yourself. And that is the product of that constant inner talk that comes to manifest externally. We are talking in our mind, and we start talking aloud with ourselves. And when a person does it, let's say compulsively, who is talking with himself along all the time, we see that person, or we consider that person as mentally unbalanced. But we don't think that about ourselves. We think that is normal what we do, because it is not still that intense. But actually, it is not normal. We must start to realize that this has nothing to do with being conscious. But we can fully begin to achieve a mental domain, to achieve that long-awaited inner silence in which the consciousness can express itself directly in us if we learn to silence our mind. For this, we must start by knowing what is the foundation of that constant inner chatter. We must understand what it is made of, understand in depth what consequences it brings us, so that we can reach an understanding of the urgent need to work on it. And it is important to begin by realizing that in our inner chatter, in each of the films that we make in our minds, we are always the hero, the one who always does things well, the one who always has the best intentions, the one that always has a very good justification for what we do. And it doesn't matter how terrible is what we are doing. We always have a good justification for what we do in our mind, or we are always the victims. So without a doubt, the foundation of our constant inner chatter is our self-sympathy, our pride. Above any affection that we say we feel for others, the truth is that we only sympathize with ourselves, with our much beloved ego. Moreover, we feel antipathy and even hatred towards those who doesn't sympathize with us. And if we begin to observe our mind and delve into who is that who is constantly speaking in our mind, we will undoubtedly find pride, reflected in its aspect of superiority or in its aspect of inferiority. But it's always a total self-importance, because we love ourselves too much. We are 100% narcissists, although we think that we are very empaths and that we are very sincere. The thing is that as long as we continue bottle up in self-sympathy, any development of our being becomes something more than impossible. Self-sympathy is actually selfishness. It is based on an overvaluation of one's own ego. The self-love that is socially accepted as necessary is actually a reaffirmation of the ego and overvaluation of the personality. True love or true self love is a constant desire to free and awaken one's own consciousness that inevitably translates into a desire to help everyone else. Since as we wake up, we realize that we all come from the same source, so we all came here with the same purpose. We are all brothers. So we are all in this planet looking for the self-realization. And it is because of this self-sympathy that we believe that our opinion is very important and that we know that or that we know about everything. And this is why we go around all the time emitting in our mind our opinion about everything. We see a person and immediately we begin to give a mental opinion about how he looks or what is that person doing. And so with everything, with objects, with situations, with the posts on social media, on our businesses and other people businesses, we think we always have to express our important opinion. So it is important to start a study and get rid of this self-sympathy if we want to achieve inner silence. And this inner chatter is often made up of half-truths and wrongly related truths. Why half-truths? Because always, to every situation that happens, we tend to add or to take something away. We tend to accommodate it and to defend our pride, our self-sympathy. Something happened, but when we comment on that situation in our mind, even when we tell it to someone else, there we always make something up. There are always some things that we add to the truth and things that we take away from the truth. For example, if we have a fight with someone and when we talk about it with someone else, we never tell it just as it happens. And if it is the other person who is going to tell the same story, he's going to tell his version of the story, in which he will be justified while the other was the culprit. So he will always add some things and he will always take away things from the truth. So when we are telling that event, we always enlarge what the other person said or did, but we will justify, we will belittle or omit what we did. Our self-sympathy always leads us to tell only what is convenient for us to tell. And what happened is that exactly that is what we do in our mind all the time. We go around commenting in our mind over and over our half-truths. But also, this mental chatter is often made up of mistakenly related truth. And it is when we deliberately put two facts together to justify our opinion. An example would be that, let's say we are walking down the street and in the opposite direction, a person comes who owes us money. And that person passes without saying hello. Immediately in our mind, we begin to talk about that person. How shameless he is, how he passes by without greeting me. And I say, that is because he doesn't want to pay me. But if I reflect on that inner chatter that I suddenly have install it in my mind, and that can last for hours or even the whole day, I will realize that I'm simply wrongly relating truths to feed a negative state in relation to that person. Since, yes, it is true that the person owes me money, and yes, it is true that the person passes by and didn't greet me, but it is not true that he did so because he didn't want to pay me, because I don't know that. I'm only speculating. Maybe that person didn't see me or didn't recognize me because he was so absorbed with his own mental chatter. Or perhaps it could be that he actually tried to avoid me, but actually, that part I don't really know. And I cannot take an speculation for certain. And that is what we do all the time in our mind. And consciousness is actually based on facts, on realities. But we want to take our speculations and we want to mix them with facts and defend this as a truth to justify and sustain our mental talk. The same, for example, if let's say my partner lives work at, I don't know, that time, and 2 hours have passed and he hasn't arrived yet. And to make the situation worse, he doesn't answer the phone. Okay, there are two facts, there are two truths. But what we do, we relate them and we start a mental chatter where all kinds of defects take advantage to manifest themselves. The jealousy I begins to say that he is probably being unfaithful to me with someone else. Or the tragical I begin to imagine that he had an accident and even imagines him dead or in a hospital. And thus we form a mental chatter. And it turns out that my couple arrived with bags because he had stopped in the store after work and had his cell phone on charge because he forgot the charger at home. And the point is that no matter what really happened, the inner chatter has terrible consequences for us. And that is something that we must start by understanding. The first consequence is that we expend a lot of mental and emotional energy. Many psychological defects and some really heavy ones are fed on, and are strengthened by this constant chatter. And our consciousness falls asleep as we live totally distracted. And as we know, consciousness can only awaken and can only manifest when we manage to live in the here and now, practicing the self-observation and the psychological depth. Another of the consequences is that we keep making mistakes. As when we are having an inner chatter, and we are having an inner chatter all the time, we are not doing things concentrated. Another of the consequences are that we get into and we stay in great confusion because we can no longer discern what is true of all this and what is not. Also, our pride grows, and every time the need to criticize everything and everyone is also growing inside of us. And obviously, internally, we are making enemies because although on the outside we smile and we are kind to others, inside us, many times at the same time, we are treating them badly. And actually, we are generating that bad energy against that people, and people start feeling that, and we ruin the relationship with everyone when we internally are having those having all that hatred inside of us. Now, let's see the most important thing. How do we work this inner chatter? How do we get to achieve the inner silence? Well, the first thing is learning not to touch things with our inner tongue. If we want to awaken consciousness, we must begin by making an effort to stop being asleep, fascinated, identified with everything. We must learn to live in constant self observation, to observe and to eliminate everything that wants to take us from the present moment, from the here and now. But it happens that since we see something, whatever it is, or since a thought arrives, be it a memory, a futurization, or an opinion, we immediately identify ourselves and we begin to touch it with our inner tongue. Let's see this example I have here. Let's say someone is walking down the street and sees a man who looks like his Uncle George. Instead of observing when the desire arises to start generating an inner chatter around that event, and instead of asking his Divine Mother to eliminate that I that wants to start parroting in the mind, what he does is that he begins to touch this with his internal tongue and begins to think, oh, that guy looks like my Uncle George. Okay, it's been a long time since I last saw him. Since last year when we went on vacation to the beach. And then how would it be to be right now on the beach? But with what money? This salary is not enough for anything. I think it's time to ask for a raise. And there it goes, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of emotions arises, both pleasant and unpleasant. And the person can even end up in an incorrect state due to the different eyes that take advantage of that chatter to manifest themselves. And the person can even make mistakes by making wrong decisions. In this case, for example, he may lose his job just due to an internal chatter that arose simply because he saw someone who looked like his Uncle George. So it is necessary that we begin to observe all these defects that constantly want to manifest in our mind, that seeks to get us out of that state of concentration and self-observation, precisely because only when we find ourselves living in the present moment, in inner silence, asking for death for every detail of every psychological defect that wants to manifest in us, right there is when our consciousness is active. And it is necessary that we begin to observe that in every situation, because sometimes we keep quiet externally, however, with our internal tongue, we skin others alive. And once we discover ourselves already having an inner chatter about something, we must stop it immediately and we must start to analyze what are we adding and what are we taking from reality. And there we will be able to discover several of our psychological defects, and also we will discover our own self-sympathy. As I said before, we must ask for death for every detail that we observe. So that is the second step. And the third aspect that we must consider to work the inner chatter is to put oneself in the other person's shoes. In any situation in which we are, where we see ourselves blaming, criticizing, judging, or treating any person badly internally for whatever reason, we must put ourselves in their shoes. And to do so, we must ask ourselves, when have I done the same? We must put aside our self-sympathy and really look inside ourselves for those moments in which we ourselves did or thought what we are criticizing in the other person. An example to clarify this point could be that let's say we have a partner and is unfaithful to us with someone else, immediately within us an inner chatter will arise in which we are going to demonize that person. We will see him or her as someone cruel, cold, insensitive, a traitor, a horrible person. But if instead of identifying with what happened, we observe ourselves and we ask for death for all that is manifested within us, and we ask ourselves sincerely, when have we done the same? If I do so, I will be able to realize that at some point I was also unfaithful to another person. And I will realize that when I did it, I didn't feel like a demon. Rather, I had my justifications. For example, that my partner no longer made me feel good, and the new person moved many beautiful things in me, and that I had fallen in love. And what I wanted was simply for the other person to understand and let me be free and pursue my happiness. So, putting ourselves in the other person's shoes will allow us to discover that inside of us we carry the same defects that we are judging and that we are criticizing in others. Therefore, taking the role of a victim will no longer be valid. And on the other hand, it will allow us to understand others, why they act like they act. And thus, that mental chatter that is based on self-sympathy will no longer have a reason to exist. So we must remember the golden rule that says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But unfortunately, even if we are very courteous and even sincere at times, there is no doubt that invisibly and internally we treat each other very badly. And more important than what we show externally is how internally we are acting, because that is our true self. And that will attract the different circumstances that we constantly live. What we have inside of us is what we attract to our lives. If we learn to work our constant inner chatter by practicing the self-observation and by practicing the psychological depth from moment to moment, we will be able to achieve that so valuable and needed inner silence, and we will start to awaken our consciousness. So that is the inner chatter. I hope I made this point clear. If you have any question, you can write that. You can write your questions in the chat, and I will be solving them at the end of the lecture there in the chat. Let's now study the psychological song. And what is a psychological song? Well, the psychological song occurs when an inner chatter worsens. When an inner chatter extends over time because it is supported by pain, by suffering. And this new ingredient that is pain, that is suffering, make us feel the need to repeat that inner chatter incessantly over and over again. So much that we tell it to other people, but we tell it over and over again, and it becomes that psychological song that we always look for the right occasion to tell to others. Sometimes we get so repetitive with the same story, with the same complaint, with the same regret, that people come to tell us, you are like a broken record or change your record, making with that things worse. Because we are going to see that the foundation of the psychological song is the self-consideration. And it turns out that the self-consideration is like a three-headed monster. We could actually represent it like this. One head is I, who am so kind, because we are always so kind, we are always the good one. And the second head is how bad they paid me, because people or the other person is always the bad guy, is always the demon. And the third head is hate and resentment. And we can use the same previous example. And let's say that when my partner left me for another person, that caused me so much pain and suffering that I turned that inner chatter into a psychological song. And now I'm sad all the time, and I'm thinking about that over and over. And every time someone asks me, how am I doing? I sing my psychological song in which I'm going to talk about how good I was with that person and how badly he paid me and how I'm not going to trust anyone else, and how I will never fall in love again, and how I hate that person who left me, and how I hate the other person for whom he left me. And actually, we can observe that with any psychological song. If they fired me from work, I'm gonna find that first head, me who sacrificed so much for that company, and look how they paid me. And from there, I begin to generate hatred and resentment and harbor feelings of revenge, and that I will never put so much effort into a job because then they pay me like that, and etc. And what is interesting is to realize that we are full of psychological songs, since each resentment that we keep inside us is a psychological song that when the right conversation arises, we will sing again. Or that at any moment we will mentally sing ourselves our psychological songs again. And due to this accumulation of psychological songs, people become resentful, antisocial, and bitter. And we must know that there are two different types of singers. There are the public singers and the solitary singers. The public singers are the ones who sing their song to whoever wants to listen to it, to the partner, the mother, the friend, or they post their psychological song on social networks seeking understanding and consideration. But there also are the solitary singers, and they are the ones who represent, let's say, the greatest danger for themselves, since they are usually the ones who have sung their song so much to people until they begin to be rejected. You know, the singer is asked to shut up, to change the record, to talk about something else, etc. And then that person gets resentful, feeling even worse. Then he closes into himself or herself, sorry, with hatred, with resentment, and can often end up in committing suicide. But there are also people who are solitary singers because they don't trust others, or because they fear what others will think about them. And they also immerse themselves in their pain and in their resentment, destroying themselves. And what we must do, we must observe and analyze to discover what type of singers we are, and to discover that so we can work and we can eliminate each one of our psychological songs. We must look that there are people who have worked too much, have suffered a lot, who feel cheated, who thinks that life owes them all that which they were never capable of achieving. They usually feel an internal sadness, a sensation of monotony, an inner exhaustion, a frustration about everything. There you can discover your own psychological song. Unfortunately, such inner secret songs go by unnoticed within ourselves, only we intentionally observe them. So if we begin to observe ourselves, we are going to actually find out that we are full full of psychological songs. Let's look at the consequences of the psychological song. The first thing is that our consciousness falls asleep completely, since if in itself the mental chatter sleeps the consciousness, the psychological song much more, because it has a greater mental and emotional load. We are constantly involved in that suffering, and while we are in those negative states of hatred and resentments, our vibratory level are very low, totally far, from love, which is the highest vibration in the universe. And we are generating a huge mental and emotional waste of energy. So that is a very bad consequences. And in that state, all our eyes get bigger. Even very perverse eyes, such as the killer or the suicidal, can get to manifest in our mind in those situations. It also, the psychological song, also causes us to have bad relationships with others, because people end up getting tired of listening to our constant song, and people start moving away from us, or can begin to avoid us, and we can end up becoming someone whose vibration is so heavy that people prefer to get away from us. In that state, it is impossible for us to raise our level of consciousness. It is impossible for us to advance spiritually. And in addition to the fact that if we are constantly getting involved in grief, in suffering, in what they did to me, in that I'm not lucky, in that I'm bad, that I'm doing very badly, and that they always paid me badly, well, that is what we will continue to attract to our lives, because the interior is only the exterior, what I live, is only a reflection of what I carry inside of me. And if we want to see a change in our lives, we need to generate an internal change, and that internal change will be reflected in the transformation of my lives and the circumstances. But it happens that if we let those psychological songs run and let ourselves be drowned by suffering and pain, we will only attract misfortunes to our lives. We have seen many times how people end up completely ruining their lives by committing crimes, and even by committing suicide, because they didn't know how to control a psychological song that went, in these cases, to the extremes. So, how are we going to work and eliminate our psychological songs? Well, first we must understand that the growth of one's soul is only possible through the forgiveness of others. If we want to transform ourselves radically, we need to sacrifice our own sufferings and get to forgive. If someone lives from instant to instant, from moment to moment, suffering because he feels that others owe him something, that others have mistreated him, that others have caused him bitterness, then nothing will grow in his interior, because he will always sing the same song. Even if you are Christians or not, you have probably have heard that of forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And the feeling that people owe us something, or the pain that we experience due to the evil deeds which others caused against us, are obstacles for all internal progress of the soul. We must understand the law of karma. We must understand that if we are receiving something in our life, it's just a consequence of something that we did. in this life or in previous existences. If someone is being rude to me, it's because I was rude to that person, probably in my previous existence. So for that reason, I must forgive so I get to be forgiven. That is something important that we start reflecting about what is karma. We have to start by realizing that the universe moves under laws that are managed by sentient beings, by conscious beings. The law of karma is the foundation of this school that is life. All situations are given so that by experiencing, let's say firsthand, the consequences of our actions, our soul comes to understand and learn. Therefore, we are never victims, since everything that happens to us is fair and happens so that we learn from it. We choose if we sink into hatred, into resentment and pain, causing the lesson to be repeated over and over again until it's learned, making the mistake again and suffering the consequences again, or we can choose to begin to rule ourselves under superior laws. That is the law of mercy, to which we will only agree if we decide to forgive so that we can be forgiven. So that is something very important that we get to understand. So, how to eliminate a psychological sunk? Well, we need to work our accounting book. We must start working on that little book of accounts that we keep inside of us, where we have recorded all our sufferings, all our misfortunes, and all the people who have paid us badly or who have not considered us. And for that, we need to check about each one of our psychological songs, those three heads. The one that how good I have been, the bad that I have been paid, and check the balance or revenge that I'm getting or that I'm generating from that psychological song. So the first thing that we are going to do is identify one of our psychological songs. We can start with the strongest that we identify, the one that we always repeat, or that which causes us the most pain. And we are going to make an effort to recognize that self-consideration, that those three heads, and we are going to reflect on each one. And I'm going to use to illustrate this exercise. I'm going to use an example. And let's say that my psychological song is that I did a favor or many favors to someone, and the moment I asked him for a favor that was very important to me, he refused, and that hurt me a lot. And I felt with resentment, and I said that I will never do a favor to anyone again, and that the day the person needs me, I will refuse to help him. Let's say that is my psychological song, the one that I'm going to work, just to make this example. And the first thing is that I'm going to see that good eye, that fake feeling. And the good eye always wants to camouflage as a virtue. Therefore, I can believe that I am very virtuous because I do favors. So in this example, I will see that I find myself that I've been a very good person because I always help him every time he needed. But I must understand that the true virtues of the soul, which always arise from love, to and give without expecting anything in return. So if I get to analyze this, I must ask myself, I did it without expecting anything in return, or I actually helped to generate a commitment in others so that they are obligated to me or to help me when I need it. The fact that I'm now feeling that this hatred, this resentment, is because I did it. I didn't did that without let's say, because I did that expecting something in return. The second thing that I must ask myself is what defects were behind so much supposed goodness. And there I can discover my pride that wants people to have me in high esteem, that people think and speak well of me, to be considered a good person. I can find those good defects that actually are defects. The third thing that I must ask myself is what were my true hidden interests? And if I reflect, if I ask myself these questions, I will begin to discover myself. And I'm going to discern that that is really a false virtue. And this is important because only by discerning and eliminating those false virtues, those good eyes, can we develop real virtues that are consciousness. We must remember that being aware, being conscious, has nothing to do with being good or being bad. So we must to be conscious, not good, not bad. So I must ask myself, I was really doing this without expecting anything in return? This is the first step toward the psychological side. So the second step, or the second thing that I'm going to observe, is the victim eye. That one who thinks about how bad they have paid me. And I must ask myself, how many times have I refused to do a favor? When have I done the same? How many times have I refused to do a favor? And even if I could say that I have never refused to do a favor, the fact that now I'm thinking so hard not to help anyone else in my life reveals that within me there is indeed that selfish eye. But if I'm honest with myself, many times I haven't done someone a favor. And of course, at that time, I felt that I had my reasons for not doing it. The second thing I must ask myself is, have I thought about doing what has been done to me? Why did I act like this? And by asking ourselves these kind of questions, we are going to discover, as I was saying in relation to the inner chatter, that inside us there are the same defects that we hate so much in others. Because if the defect didn't exist in us, we would simply not be experiencing that pain as a consequence. And that way we will discover that victim eye. And we will come to understand others, and therefore we can be able to forgive them. We must reflect about karma, and we can get rid of that big victim eye. And the third step to work the psychological songs are to get to total forgiveness. And for this, we must ask ourselves, if I haven't paid my debts, if I found that I already did what I am judging in that person, that I already have, that I know that I have that defect inside of me, that I didn't do a favor to others, to many others. If I haven't paid my debts, why do I want others to pay? What situations should I forgive and forget so that I can be forgiven for my bad actions? What actions should I take to cancel my karmic debts? So if we eliminate all the defects inside us that we discover through this meditation that I am teaching today, if we get to forgive what has been done to us, we will be able to get out of that recurrence and we will be able to cancel our karmas. And also, by sacrificing for humanity, by teaching that person or every person about this knowledge about how to get rid of these psychological defects that keeps our consciousness asleep, teach them how to regenerate themselves, how to work their inner chatter, their psychological songs, and how to search for the true purpose of their existence, we will start to develop love and we will start to receive dharma to pay for all our karmas. As we must know that if we don't eliminate the defects that take us to live that situation, if we don't pay for the karmas that we have, we are going to repeat the same story over and over, to repeat the same lesson over and over until we get to reflect on it and to transcend these lessons, so we get to be free of all of our psychological songs. So this is the explanation about the psychological song. I hope I have made this clear. We must know that if we want to transform ourselves radically, we need to sacrifice our own suffering. So this has been today's lecture. If you have any question about this lecture, you can write your question in the chat, and I will be solving all your questions there in the chat. I will invite you to next lecture that will be next Sunday, and we are going to be talking about states and events. And this is a quite interesting lecture also because with this lecture we are going to learn how we can combine the inner state with the external states, with the inner states with the external events, so we learn to live consciously. Well, this has been all for today. Thank you very much for all who watched this video, and see you next Sunday. Thank you and ciao ciao.